Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the unofficial companion podcast to HBO Max's hit show, Industry. I'm Jen.
I'm Kristen.
And we are the Wall Street Skinny, two lifelong friends, former investment bankers, and teachers who are here to break down everything in your favorite show, from the finance to the romance, and to give you the skinny on what's real and what's Hollywood. Okay, so this is season 2, episode 2, Giant Squid. And I think we mentioned this briefly on the last episode. So
yes,
I'm going to try to talk, but let me just say that this whole episode was chock full of Shakespearean and historical quotes that even as an English major, Kristen, I found some of them a little over my head. I'm not going to lie.
Really?
And Giant Squid is one of them. I'm still not quite sure what the Giant Squid is referencing.
I feel like it must be Bloom.
Sure to me.
I feel like it must be Bloom, but why? I don't know.
Is the Giant Squid 100%? Yeah. I'm just like, is it 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea? Is it something else?
I see. Like the actual.
I'm not quite sure what the anchor reference is.
Yeah.
So that was just something I was hung up on the entire time. But okay, well, let's get started.
That, and then also the fact that now we have moved entirely from fixed income sales and trading to equity capital markets and equity sales and trading. So they've done a 180 between all of season 1 and now season 2, which again is great because it gives us a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. And this is my wheelhouse and I'm super psyched, but it also was wait, how did that happen?
Listen, I think they gave themselves a bit of leeway flexibility wise when they launched the show by calling Harper's desk cross-product sales. But as we've said, even the most macro, cross-asset desks don't serve this many functions all at once. And Rishi has become a catch-all for 10 different people within fixed income in the first season. Now he's an entire other division of the bank type of trader. So it's just, it's great. It's wild. We're here for it. I'm fine. It doesn't bother me at this point.
No. But yeah, so look, the scene opens with, if you remember from the prior episode, Eric and Harper were supposed to meet with Phelim. And instead of going to the meeting, Harper was off going to listen to Bloom because she's trying to obviously win him as a client. And so Eric is sitting there with Phelim and he's like, oh, things happen. And Phelim is you're super straight-laced. We saw him in season 1, always had his glass of milk. And he's like, well, it's polite to wait. And Eric is just you and your superstitions. And Phelim is basically well, I prefer the two of you together. If you remember from season 1, there was all this drama with something with Phelim's wife and Eric. They moved past it, but I don't think Phelim necessarily wants Eric solo. He wants the two of them.
And remember, too, Harper has been leading this relationship since Eric and Phelim had the falling out, and she has been pushing hard for Eric to split the sales credits. He's getting all the credit for her work with Phelim, which is what happens, by the way, when you're a junior analyst. The dollars that are credited to the trades done with that client go next to the name of the person who owns that account. And only as you get more senior does some of owning that relationship get actually credited to you with sales credits and some kind of scorecard. So she's asking for that. And Eric has blown her off every time. And last time she asked for it, he said, have you ever heard the legend of the giant squid? So everything's all tied together here.
Yes. So the next thing now we see Harper and the talk has ended. So she's going down to Bloom and there's all these other salespeople trying to impress him. One's talking about how he has all these 6 monitors and blah, blah, blah. Another guy's trying to impress him with research. And Bloom's just look, I'm sorry. Do you have any idea how many salespeople bring me immaterial material? I am just not interested in people who comment on the direction of the wind. I'd much prefer if you could make it blow. And this becomes something that's going to come back later. And so he says,
when he
ask
says
yourself,
that, he's
what's
looking
your edge?
directly at Harper, being what you got? What's your edge? And how can you differentiate yourself from these vultures? Right?
Yeah.
But she freezes.
Well, yeah. So at first she's sort of listening to him, nodding along. And then all of a sudden it's record screech to a halt. She's like, shit, He wants me to talk. And so she goes to try to say something and she chokes. And so then that salesperson jumps in trying to impress him. Like, hey, I've reserved this box for you at Anfield for you and Leo, his son. And Bloom is completely unimpressed and talks about how, he's basically already friends with these guys. Like nothing is impressing him. And he says that on Friday, the day that they're trying to get him to come with them to this, again, Anfield, whatever it is. I'm assuming it's like a horse race or something.
It's it's where the Liverpool Football Club plays.
I was close.
And Bloom says, John Henry's a good friend. That's the owner of Liverpool and the Red Sox, by the way, Kristen, for you in Boston and the Boston Globe.
Cool. Did not know that. Learned something new. Yeah.
So he's like, listen, I'm not impressed by box seats to go watch Liverpool Football Club. I know the owner.
Yep. So ultimately, Bloom rejects everyone. And as he's walking out, he says to Harper, good luck with everything. Remember, it's all a cycle of victory and defeat. And then as he's walking away, one of the guy goes, what an epic bloke. I think he liked me. So
like read the room, bro. He did not like
you. No, he was not impressed at all. So now we're moving back over.
Room, though, and she looks devastated because she knows that she's just blown her first opportunity. She wasted this whole morning to try to get a great word in with Bloom and nothing came of it.
Yes. So now we're back at Pierpoint's office and Yaz is up meeting with Celeste. So again, she's the MD in private wealth management. So Yaz is like pitching herself, saying she's done a lot of work for Maxim's funds. Maxim is this mutual friend that they met we're introduced by Maxim
who introduced them.
Introduced them.
And with whom
and then also future
Yasmin
Dawn
is now sleeping.
Yes. And then also Future Dawn Partners, who is going to become a fixture of the rest of this episode and actually into the next few seasons. But so she talks about how she's done a lot of flow and execution, but she really wants to learn more about private wealth management. And so Celeste asks about the people. So Yaz, this has been like the theme throughout where she's like, they're fine, whatever. And Celeste says it's ugly work, market-facing roles. There's nothing elegant in that part of the business. I imagine they hate you. And Yaz is like, yeah, they fucking despise me.
So Yaz wasn't fooling her at all. She's trying to say the bare minimum nice things about these people, which, by the way, is 100% rule number one of any interview you go into. You never talk shit about anyone, even if they are a terrible manager. You hate working with them. You can't stand them. Yeah. You are not allowed to speak ill of them in an interview. It will never, ever serve you. So she's doing the right thing. Celeste sees right through it. But every time Yaz is talking about her current role, Celeste is like, oh, you make flow sound so delicious, right? No one cares in private wealth management about that. It's all about the relationships, right?
Yeah.
So this whole like executing trades, covering clients, blah, blah, blah. She calls it that ugly work. She's this refined sensibility of like, we're just there to be this wonderful thing for our clients on the other end of a phone, like all these different things that.
Well, and actually I want to talk about that in a minute because I disagree with a lot of what she says. But so she goes on and Celeste like point blank asks her, why are you sleeping with Maxim? Although in a more vulgar way. And Yaz is just like, well, I'm single. And so then Celeste invites her to come along with her to some client dinner. She's entertaining. She says Enzo is a Cucinelli type, very rakish. And his son, Rocco. She's like, I don't know him well, hard to gauge. More your age though. Says,
Cucinelli, for guys who don't know, is like a high-end Italian luxury designer.
I actually did not know that. I just was like, it sounds like some Italian fancy person. So she says, it's more of a personal service. They're paying us to be at the end of the phone, take them out for dinner to make them feel safe. She goes on to say, investment returns are as steady and boring as a savings account, but a savings account doesn't come with us. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this because what she says is, well, technically, sure, private wealth management does a lot more than just that. And so we actually had an episode, again, on the big podcast where we interviewed Tomi Abbiati, who is he is the CEO of like a $36 billion private wealth management firm. And their clients, I think the minimum to work with them, you need to have like $200 million of assets. Now, the thing is that if you're hiring someone like that, you are hiring them not just because like you want them to deliver you investment returns. A lot of it is like tax advice, right? How to structure whatever your estate is or what have you in the best way to get the lowest taxes, to get into funds that otherwise you would not be able to get into. Like they are able to get into, say, like a Millennium, right? Or into a Citadel, which you by yourself cannot get into that. And by the way, yes, those people do have better returns than like other places. And he also was talking about like, yes, some of what he is doing is he's being the person on the other end of the phone. So like someone says, I want to buy the house next to me because I just don't want someone like living in my space. But what does that mean if I do that? Like, is this bad to show my kids that I could just buy a house because I don't want someone to live next to me? And so he said part of it is that aspect that she's talking about, but that's not the only thing. And then there's other crazy shit where, again, you need to listen to this episode. He talked about one of the most insane things that they had to do for a client. It's like the impossible ask. Like, you need to be the I know a guy person. So someone wanted like Golden Globes award tickets, which are literally impossible to get, and they had to figure out a way to do it. So I think that the way that they're painting it is there's parts that are correct, but it's not the whole picture. To just say,
totally agree.
Yeah.
And I think that given they introduced Celeste in this little bit of a confusing situation where you can't tell if she's a paid sex worker or not.
Yeah.
Celeste is continuing to drag through that almost like, listen, we are just like the window dressing on this very boring investment strategy. And she's always like oozing this kind of persona that goes along with that impression that like we're there to be the pretty faces on the other end of the phone or across the seat at dinner, which is really reducing private wealth management to all of the negative stereotypes about it that I think are out there. I think everyone thinks it's for like beautiful women who can't cut it in the more rough and tumble, nitty gritty sales and trading stuff. Okay, just go over to private wealth management. And I'm so with you, Kristen. I think that that is a gross misrepresentation of what can really happen at these roles. And so I'm so glad you called that out.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that there's elements that are true, but there's so much more to private wealth management. And I just think that it does it a little bit of a disservice because it can be, again, an amazing place to work. And like, this is not the whole thing.
And by the way, a lot of these big private capital firms have now really expanded their private wealth management capabilities because they're like, wait a minute, we're giving access into our sexy private capital funds that no one can get into to all these other people so they can charge their private wealth management clients those fees. Why don't we start doing it ourselves?
Exactly.
So like this has become now a staple at some of the big, sexy private capital firms in a way that it never used to be.
100%. So now next scene, we're back and Eric is pitching in the morning meeting, talking about Rycan Healthcare, which is going to be the, I guess, company at the heart of this episode. So Rycan Healthcare, again, made up company. It is a quote unquote leader in the telemedicine space where last year, remember, this is like the middle of COVID, they pitched a pricey healthcare subscription service. And so Rishi jumps in. He's like, remote doctors helps rich people get access to medical care without leaving the house. And someone else pipes in and that here they're talking about kind of like the history of what I guess happened at this firm. And I actually want to spend a little bit of time on this because like part of it doesn't make a lot of sense, or I guess it does, but it's a little bit hard to parse exactly what happened. But so one of the people comes in and says, a consortium of private...
it's
DVD
guy
who says
who has come over from New York. And it's really important actually that he's speaking over Eric here.
100%. So he pipes in, he says, a consortium of private equity firms provided rescue financing to them at the peak of the pandemic. So I want to pause and just talk about that for a second. So consortium of private equity firms just means like a group of private equity firms. Now, when they say they provided rescue financing, whenever I hear financing, I usually think debt. I would assume here, though, I mean, look, they're private equity firms. Yes, under like the Apollo brand name, you have private credit and private equity, but like I assume that they actually potentially did a take private here is what actually would have happened, just like consistent with what they talk about after this, because they say, okay, so something happened at the peak of the pandemic. Now we have negotiated with one of these firms, right? So one of these private equity firms to buy their block, meaning their ownership stake at a 3% discount and place it with our clients. So Rishi then says, I am now the proud owner of 75 million shares of Rycon, but I'm a market maker. So sadly, I'm not looking to keep these shares. So, which is, by the way, exactly true. When banks get involved, they oftentimes will underwrite this stuff, which means they buy the whole thing from whoever the seller is, and then they need to actually go out and place it with the final owners. Like the banks actually post like 2008, they cannot take a lot of this proprietary risk. So they used to have a little bit more discretion. Like if they like some of it, maybe they could keep more. Now that is not something that they really can do.
They can keep a tiny bit,
they can
right?
Keep, a tiny bit. Yeah, but not 75
remember,
million.
This is all leveraged, right? They're not taking $75 million of cash that they have lying around and buying 70. So we find out later that it's a $3.3 billion deal. So I guess the share price is something like $44 a share, right?
Yeah.
So they don't have $3.3 billion of cash lying around to just be invested in this one equity name, right? That is not the business that this bank is in. They're an intermediary. So they're holding it temporarily until they can sell it at a higher price to someone else.
Yes. So DVD pipes in says you're looking to flip them, which like, I mean, yes, that is exactly what underwriting is. I mean, I think this was more for the benefit of the viewer.
For the viewer.
The viewer, exactly. And so DVD then says the lockup period has just ended, so your client should know that this is the best opportunity since why can't went public. Now, this is why I think that what this whole thing probably was again, during the pandemic, the group of private equity firms did a leverage buyout, or again, maybe it wasn't a leverage buyout. It could have just been a take private without leverage, but probably there was leverage, where they bought this company and again, took it private. And then they did an IPO, meaning an initial public offering. Now, usually I mean, with these sponsor-backed IPOs, the companies were public, like they were publicly traded. The private equity firm comes in, they buy everything, so it's no longer in the markets. And then you go out and you take the company public again. And the reason I think that is because usually the lockup period post an IPO is like 180 days. And the reason for that is when a company goes public, there's going to be, so if there's, I don't know, called $100 million, and I'm just going to use that because it's a round number. I know that this is a much larger company, but if there's $100 million of equity that is being taken out to the market, the actual market cap of all the equity is going to be much larger. Maybe it's like $1 billion of equity. So they're only taking a little bit out in the first place. And you don't want the other investors to just start flooding the markets now with all these shares. Like you want, if someone buys in, it's a supply and demand thing. So there is a lockup period where you cannot start selling shares. Now, oftentimes what will happen is after the IPO, after that lockup period has ended, there will often be either what's called a secondary or follow-on offering, where it's like an orderly additional capital raise where you're going out to the market again to raise more shares. Now, for whatever reason, it seems here they decided to do a block trade. Only one of the private equity firms
like only one of the private equity firms, correct?
Yeah.
And so only one.
Exactly. So that's why in theory you would then potentially do a block trade here versus the formal secondary offering. And this actually brings up one more point, and this is what we talk about. We actually have an IPO 101 episode where we get into all this. But in general, I do think it's important to understand, like when a company does go out and raise capital, the money that is coming in can either go to the company, like if the company needs to shore up their balance sheet and go out and use it for general corporate purposes and blah, 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 or it can be the existing seller selling out. So again, if it's going to the company, that's called primary. If it's going to the other investors who are owners, that's called secondary. So anyway, the point is we now have one of those private equity firms who, again, probably was part of this take private IPO situation, and now they want to sell their chunk, and that is where this block trade originated. So that is what I took from like this backstory.
Yeah, so, I think that was a really important piece that was missing in the exposition here, is that there had to have been an initial public offering in order for this block trade to happen, because you couldn't have a block trade happen from a privately traded company, right? I'm guessing that wouldn't make any sense. And they're talking about these shares trading publicly in the market. I'm also a little bit confused as to why a telemedicine firm needed rescue financing in the middle of the pandemic.
During the pandemic.
That they'd be printing money, but whatever. Details. I have one other question for you, Kristen. So they talk about Rishi taking down the big block at a 3% discount. I'm curious if you know. So he's taking it down at a 3% discount with the hope of then obviously selling it back into the market as a premium and selling it to these investors at some markup to that. What are the typical spreads?
Oh, that I'm not entirely sure. So in full disclosure, I worked in equity capital markets in the converts desk, and we did do a number of converts plus equity issuances. So a lot of times you would have those concurrent. I never personally worked on a block trade, but so just in terms of fees, I mean, look, the fees that you would pay on an initial public offering, those are going to be the highest of any kind of equity offering. Those are usually like the 6 to 7% range for a smaller company. Now, if you're Facebook or you're some massive company that like everyone wants to get in on, they're going to be paying drastically lower fees. I mean, I think that the fees on the Facebook IPO were less than 100 basis points. I forget exactly the amount, but again, it can vary, but it could be up to like 6 to 7%. Now, the follow-on offerings, those are a lot easier. So the fees there are much lower. It is going to probably depend on the size. The exact amount, I'm not sure. But if an IPO was called 6 to 7%, I'm guessing it's maybe 100 basis points or less. But the point is that these follow-on offerings are usually going to have lower fees. I assumed that part of the reason for this discount was also so that they could, when they flip it, they would be able to sell it to the other customers or the other investors at a discount as well.
As like the markup.
So how much was their discount, the underwriter's discount versus the discount offered to the other?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the actual split would be, but that's a really good point. That part of it, you'll actually see this if you look up any of the filings. It'll say, quote unquote, underwriter's discount.
Yes.
And then you would also expect that probably if you're buying in, you should be getting a discount there too. And by the way, in an IPO, the discount, it's actually called the IPO discount that you're usually going out at to what they feel is the fair market price is 20%. So it's 6% for fees. Again, usually that's the cap, but still. And then 20% is the IPO discount for the investors. So
you want it to be a no-brainer that this thing is going to trade up on the follow because it's so steeply discounted to fair value. Yeah. And then one other question. So they seem to have the institutional sales and trading desk here being the ones who are placing these shares with all of these hedge funds, et cetera, like sector specialists is something that we're going to get into for a sec. But I'm curious, to what extent is the equity capital markets group at all involved with this as well?
There is the syndicate desk. So within equity capital markets, there will be quote unquote syndicate. They're the ones that are really working on this. I don't know the exact lines of where they are placing stuff versus getting involved with sales and trading. I still think it's the sales and trading people who maintain those relationships. And when we used to get, I'm going to talk in the converts context, when we were actually doing the issuance, we would get our little term sheets and we'd walk on down to the sales and trading desk and give it to all the, the salespeople and the traders. And like they were the ones that were then dealing with that. So and
that's what we see here, right? So we've got Eric holding all of the term sheets. We think that's what he's probably holding. And finally, as DVD and Rishi have been talking over him in this whole meeting and running the whole thing, right? Harper finally strolls into the meeting. DVD is catching her up. And Eric has finally decided enough is enough. He remembers, like, I'm supposed to be the one running the meeting. I'm in charge, right? So he throws these deal sheets across the table and says, DVD, can you please start handing out the deal sheets? And clearly it's implied that is like the typical role of the junior person who's involved in all this, which is something that does track, I think. And, those are all the investors who have apparently expressed interest in the deal or the sector.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple more things, actually. So first of all, I don't believe that on a deal sheet, that's where you're going to have like the clients.
I would think so. Yeah. I would think it would just be literally the terms. Yeah.
Yes. So that I do think was like a simplification. So usually there would be like a one pager with all the terms. And then, it would be like the actual salespeople and traders. Like they kind of know. Yes, maybe they have another document that like has that, but that doesn't usually go on the deal sheet.
You'd never be like, here's a list, Millennium, G Shaw, blah, blah, blah. They all want this stuff. It would be like, you're going to go to your client and tell them why this is such a great deal.
Exactly. So that's sort of little thing number one, which I thought was like a little bit like, well, I think that's not entirely true. But Eric does say, and this is specific to what we just talked about, Eric does say, remember, this isn't an IPO. There won't be a month-long roadshow to drum up interest. We have less than 24 hours to build the book and adios the full position out the door. So back to what I was talking about, in that IPO, what happens is this thing called a roadshow where you have the management team of the company and the bankers. They literally travel all around and they meet with all those prospective investors, with the Fidelities, with the Wellingtons, with anyone who might be a potential investor. And then they start to build the book, meaning they start to basically ask their clients, hey, how much of this IPO, like how many shares do you think you'd be interested and at what price? And then they would have some interested in this many shares, this person interested in this many shares. And they basically try to quote unquote build a book that is oversubscribed, meaning they have more buyers so that when they go out and they price it, like I said, they know that they will get that pop. And here, and then this is also true where it's like when you have, whether it's a secondary offering or like here, this block trade, you're not going to have that. Like this is a much less, I don't want to say the stakes are lower, but this thing is already trading. So there's research on it, all this stuff. So anyway, so DVD then offers a quarterback on this one. And Eric is like, no, Phelim Bishan is the anchor to the deal. That's my client. And then Rishi hops in again for the viewer to sort of explain what the anchor is. He says, the anchor is numero uno on the deal. It takes the largest chunk of shares. And Eric asks, do you have to keep doing that? But again, like this is all for the viewer's benefit.
He's like, stop the explainers, right? But like the writers are doing a favor for the non-finance people.
Yeah. And then I actually liked this. There Rishi goes, between us, I think the kid's got a minor brain injury, obviously talking about a DVD. And so Harper then asks Eric if Phelim reconfirmed at breakfast that he was actually going to come in as the anchor. And Eric doesn't say anything. And so someone else pipes in. They say the iBankers upstairs who built the book. By the way, no, the iBankers do not build the book. I'm sorry. They are the ones who are helping with the pricing. No, they're not the ones building the book. But they say the iBankers upstairs who built the book are happy with Phelim as the anchor, but they've also identified Anna Gearing at Future Dawn Partners as a specialist in the sector ESG fund. So there is definitely the case that like the client, right? So if you are Rycan Healthcare, you might care about who's going to now be a major investor because if you're an equity owner, you have influence on the direction of the company. So it is true that the seller, especially with these big private equity firms, they might care who the baby's getting passed to, especially if they're not planning to exit entirely. But the investment bankers, like they're not the ones building the books. It's the sales and trading people. So wanted to make that quick point on that.
Absolutely. And so Future Dawn, will remember, was someone whom Yasmin named as one of her clients that she's been close to. And DVD gives us the exposition that they're an ESG investor, quote unquote, social impact, one of the good guys. So remember, this was filmed at the height of ESG being all the rage. And it turns out that was one of Daria's clients. So Robert chimes in and says, I knew her, Horatio. And that's a quote from Hamlet, right? When Hamlet is musing on the dead, meaning we all know Daria has been fired and is now effectively dead to the people on the trading floor. And by the way, Robert's more than a little happy that she's gone, I think, because she was a total bitch to him. And Harper offers to jump in and cover the account. And DVD says, well, just FYI, because they're a leader in the space, if they're not involved, this deal is dead on arrival. So like we know now that this client, who is Yasmin's, is a key linchpin to the deal, just as Eric's client Phelim is a key linchpin to the deal. So we can see that they're setting up for obviously something to happen where Yasmin now needs to get involved and Harper's trying to take something 100%. That might be hers. Yeah. Yes,
100%. So there was a lot of juicy stuff in that little section. Okay, so now also then as they're like leaving the room, there's the Rishi off-camera dialogue where he says, you ever met that Phelim geezer? I tried to take him whoring once after a client dinner and he looked at me like I'm some and then ... which again, fully tracks with what we know about Phelim.
Yep, that he's the most deeply sensitive of Eric's clients that we've met so far and is the one with this moral code. And and he's getting involved in this like ESG friendly deal, I guess. So whatever.
Which again, all tracks. So so as they're leaving, Harper goes to Eric to apologize for missing breakfast. And she was like, sorry, I fucked up. And she says, I want to be honest. I went to go see Bloom speak at a town hall.
Well, wait, she says, I want to be honest. And he goes, try it out. AKA, that would be a change.
Ah, good point. Yes, that's a good point. So she says, you were right. It was a distraction. I'll call Phelim with a credible excuse. How was it? Did he confirm tomorrow he's the anchor? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but by the way, she totally dismisses Jesse because she couldn't land Bloom. So she starts deriding him, right? She's like, oh, speak is a bit kind. He bloviated. It was a distraction. You were right. So basically, because she failed to land him, she's pretending he was just ranting at the conference. And she's offering to make nice with Phelim and offering to call him with an excuse and wants to make sure he's confirmed as the anchor. And Eric cuts her off and says, don't do that, and tells her not to call Phelim and says, if I'm not on the desk, you're not allowed to answer. Do you have the exact quote?
Yeah, he says, don't do that. Actually, I don't want you calling him. Let's be unequivocal. You are not to call Phelim, and if he calls the desks, you are not to answer. You set a meeting with a sensitive client and bailed. Forget bad business practice. That's bad manners straight up. For a third-year analyst, I gave you a super privileged position, and you shit the bed. How can you even ask for a sales credit split?
And by the way, now we learned that she's a third-year analyst, so more time has elapsed than we thought.
So actually, like, it should have been 2018 that season 1 was? Like,
yes, exactly. So, like, none of this really tracks. But so now we know that we've had a little bit of an acceleration of time. But this also explains why Harper and Yasmin are both acting even bigger in their britches than we thought. Because I thought they were, like, second-year analysts. Third-year analysts, that's like a whole other thing, by the way, because so in sales and trading, it's very rare to get third-year analysts. You typically go from 2 years in the analyst program to getting promoted to associate. Third-year analysts are, I think, more and more rare.
They're more common in IBD and in capital markets
these days. Yeah, but
capital markets and IBD, they're pretty common.
Interesting. I wonder why.
Or they were in 2010. I don't know. I do think that in general, sales and trading tends to promote more quickly. Like in capital markets, it was unheard of to have a analyst get promoted after year 2. It was basically everyone did a third-year analyst rotation. Yeah. Well, usually you would have like 2. So there would be like year 1, year 2, and then third-year analyst. That's what I did, right? There was a third-year analyst rotation, so I went into banking. That is very common. I don't think I know anyone who got promoted after 2 years in capital markets when I was there at that time. And if you were in banking proper, it's possible they would promote after 2 years. But again, in capital markets, it wasn't.
Interesting.
But yeah.
That's
and that
really
could have
cool.
changed. But yeah.
I
It's
didn't
just
know
funny
that.
how
Yeah,
it's so
so
different.
It's rare in sales and trading. Again, it can happen, but that's typically for someone who might have maybe switched desks. So they've only been on their new desk for 1 year. And they're like, you kind of need another year under your belt before we're ready to promote you up. I actually was afraid that I was at risk of that because I switched over from that joint venture with IBD after my first year. But I just thought that was interesting. And that may also be like a US versus Europe or UK thing too, possibly. I'm not sure.
Or bank to bank. So it could also be like at, I don't know, XYZ bank. It's much more common. Like if you're a superstar, maybe they'll promote you after 2 years. But for the most part, maybe.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
Anyway.
The 3 different banks I worked at didn't have really a robust third-year analyst program in sales and trading. But it's quite possible that exists elsewhere.
Very interesting. But yeah, by the way, so now in the background again, we get Rishi with some more off-camera dialogue. He says, you might as well call me Jerome Powell because I'm the fucking market. So Jerome Powell, for those of you who don't know, which by the way, if you're listening to our podcast, you should know, but he is the chairman of the Fed here in the US, at least as of right now in 2024. We will see what happens when the administration changes. There's some drama potentially brewing there. Anyway. Okay, so next up we see Yasmin walk onto the desk and Hillary asks why she's late. And so Yasmin is like, well, she had a meeting with a saleswoman in PWM. Now this is great. Venetia pipes in. Remember, Venetia was like that super annoying analyst from the like recruiting event in year 1. And now she's this like obnoxious first-year analyst who keeps pushing back on Yasmin, like trying to put her in her place. So Venetia says, I did a rotation of PWM during my spring week at Credit Suisse, RIP. It was so frothy, she says with disdain. So Yasmin says, well, Kenny's late. And Hillary's like, yeah, but he's at a breakfast meeting with an actual FX client. He says, look, I'm happy to give you special privileges given our Dedalian complications, but don't take the piss. And so Yaz says, I was up talking other parts of the bank. You know, one pure point, right? Where they're trying to say that like, essentially, it's the firm that's making money, so they should be working together more. And Hillary knows what she's doing. And he says, plots, schemes, career machinations, whatever, file them all under not on my time. Now, in the background, then you hear Jackie say to Venetia, how old were you when you rode your first pony? She says, that's not a euphemism. I'm asking when daddy got you in the saddle. Anyway, so next.
Well, the whole point of this conversation is that they're reinforcing what the stereotype is of private wealth management on the trading floor. So private wealth management thinks that the trading floor is this rough and tumble, like crude group, which Jackie has done nothing to disabuse us of that notion. And then we've got Venetia and Jackie looking down on PWM as frothy, just pretty faces. There's no real like hardcore technical skills involved, right? So we've always had this theme throughout the show of everyone looking down on everyone else. And
which I do think is valid. I do think that is how sales and trading and probably banking view private wealth management a little bit.
I think so. I don't think that's wrong. Yeah, because also dealing with institutional investors of the type who are calling the trading floor every day about individual trades, execution, big trade ideas, the markets, problems, the type of conversation you're having with them versus the type of conversation about like tax optimization with someone within someone's portfolio. Just think about the pace, the pressure, the tone of that conversation is going to be very, very different. Like you need to have your shit together within 30 seconds to make decisions in real time when you're fielding those calls in institutional sales and trading. Whereas like, you know, some billionaire calls you about like, hey, you know, I'm really trying to think about optimizing, you know, my capital gains taxes on this real estate portfolio of houses in Nantucket or whatever.
No, Jen. I would like to go to the freaking Golden Globes.
I want to go to the Golden Globes. By the way, that's really fucking stressful, by the way, because they're like, I'm going to the Golden Globes, right? You have my ticket. So it's stressful in a different way. But you know what I'm saying? It's all just new levels, new devils. But I cannot stand Venetia. Every time she's on screen, I just want to rip my hair out. And they've done such a great job with that.
Yes, they have. All right. So next, Hillary asks Yaz if she's touched base with Anna Gearing from Future Dawn. And Yaz says, no, why? So Hillary replies, Pal is intrigue. Lots of whispers of her name on the floor. Read the CPS equity deal happening tomorrow. So Jackie pipes in, says, I hear Anna's fund moved to Berlin. Brexit, Exodus. And Yaz replies, yep, German husband. To which Hillary says, Yeah, well, no one's perfect. And Jackie says, perfect Aryan kids, though. Yaz, and by the way, so Yaz then says Bodis and Olympia.
By the way, Jackie is shocked that she has this crazy inside info. And Yasmin's like, I just asked what her kids' names were, right? Like, so again, we know that Yasmin is good at building these relationships and like cares about the clients when a lot of the other people don't.
But that's the whole thing, because there's literally like through season 3, there's just like, I mean, nonstop. They talk about how bad Yaz is at her job. And I'm like, but she's not. I don't know. So anyway, I liked that part because I'm like, she's not so bad at her job. Whatever. So Hillary then says, if anything comes in anywhere from gearing, deal with it. It's an equity block, which is still an FX client. We need to at least seem to know what she's doing at this bank. And so Jackie says, you want us coordinating with CPS? Fuck me sideways. God is dead. And Hillary says, we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. I'm going to assume, Jen, that this is some kind of Shakespearean thing. So I'll let you.
Henry V.
There we go. I didn't know
it's
that.
when the British are headed into war against the French and they are woefully outnumbered. So you've seen, I think there was like a whole HBO series, Band of Brothers, right? Like this is where the quote comes from.
Got it. But by the way, like the opposite of one pure point. It's basically like, hey, they're like their whole
we're at war.
Like deal
we're at war and we're
hinges.
Outnumbered.
Yeah, but but their whole deal hinges on like this one client, and they're like, well, let's be careful. You know, let's make sure we don't give away our
let's make sure that they don't get credit for this. Whatever comes through has to have FX's name on it. No, there is no one pure point thing, and 100%.
Yeah. So back on the CPS desk, Harper tries to call Anna and she announces herself. And Anna's just like, who the hell are you? Anna
she says, I don't know who you are, so why would I talk to you about it? Which is great.
Right. And so Harper says that she was Daria's backup coverage. And Anna's just like, I tend to deal with your FX desk for my hedging. And Harper's just like, well, but I wanted to talk to you about an upcoming equity block. And to your point, she's like, I don't know who you are. Like, basically go away. Yeah. She hangs up.
Well, Harper takes that rejection in stride, which is interesting because she got rejected by Bloom. She's been rejected by Anna. Like, she's striking out all over the place. And she starts chatting with DVD. And I feel like there's like kind of like a
there's a
vibe there. There's a little bit of a flirtation 100%. There. Yeah.
Well,
okay, cool.
They're both at the New York. Yeah, they both have the New York connection. And
but like, who in finance doesn't have the fucking New York connection? I know they're in London. But like, but like everyone who's in the London office, when they weren't working in the London office, were probably working in the New York office. Like,
true.
She's like, I went to SUNY Binghamton, and he's like,
no, but I do think if you were born and raised in New York, I do think there's a little bit of like a connection there, more than just I worked in New York. Okay, everybody's worked in New York, but like having grown up there, I do think is something a little different. Now, to your point, DVD was born and raised, he said, on the Upper West Side, which is a whole different thing. Like people that were born in New York City, that is a whole separate thing than just like having been born in New York in a suburb. But you know what I mean? So
like Albany.
In Albany. Yes, that is different. But still, I do think you find your people, whatever. So next thing, Phelim calls. This is a problem. So Rishi is like, ooh, the anchor. And Harper doesn't answer. And DVD's just like, what the fuck? Answer the phone.
Because Eric has told her in no uncertain terms, do not pick up this phone.
Mm-hmm. And DVD finally just picks up the phone, hands it to her, and is like, answer it. So Harper picks up, and Phelim asks her to run through the deal. And so she says, the book is building up nicely, almost covered, just waiting on some sector specialists to confirm participation. And Phelim replies, almost covered? I was assured that Anna had done the work and that she was in the book. And Harper says, I'm sure it's just timing. Like, I'm told this deal will come cheap to comps and will trade well in the breaks. And Phelim says, I don't give a hoot that the sellers are eager to sell. If Anna's not participating, then I'm not anchoring, and Pierpoint has a dead deal. So Phelim is pissed. And so he says, you know, this isn't the news I was expecting, especially from someone so junior and marketing one of her first block trades. He then hangs up, and as he's hanging up, Eric comes over, and he's like sensing that something is not good. So he then tries to call Phelim and says, let's work through it. Trust me,
you can tell Phelim's freaking out on the other end of the line. Like whatever he's saying to Eric is not good. And Eric's just trying to convince him that Anna's going to add, right? He's like, she was a size buyer at the IPO. It's just a question of quote unquote, how many boots she's trying to fill, right? So Phelim is clearly asking him, hey, if Anna's in, what size is she in for? Because we hear Eric say, I can't tell you that over the phone. So I'm assuming that's what he was asking specifically. And obviously and I don't know if you can, but I imagine it's not legal or kosher to tell other clients the amount that other buyers in the deal are in for. So Eric hang up and looks shocked, and he goes, Phelim just pulled his order. And he now starts freaking out at Harper, blaming her for this.
And DVD, there's the power struggle with them. So DVD is basically like, well, it's not her fault that you don't communicate. And then he asks, why would you misrepresent Anna's interest in the deal to Phelim? And
well,
so
he asked Eric
you can see
Eric, he's like, why would she do that? That's the wrong thing to do. Like, why would she do the wrong thing on your behalf?
True, which also like she would do the wrong thing all day, every day. But yes,
of course, yeah, like she's so moral. That's a great point.
The ethics of Eric and Harper are like 100% in alignment, but they're completely the opposite of DVD. Like DVD
also,
is very much a rule
all the
follower.
Time. So like she said the wrong thing. She should have just been like, yeah, Anna's fine, everything's great. Like, love you, bye. You know.
Yep.
And Eric says, our job is to help people make the decision that we know they need to make, often much faster than they are comfortable making it. People are just knots of fear. We loosen them, we win. This isn't utopia. This is par, which I loved that. I thought that was such a good sales quote because that does toe the line of ethics, but he's not wrong.
Yeah. And so this is where we start to see this difference in the attitudes, in the mentality of these two people. And so DVD is like, this is not how we do it in New York. It was more democratic. And Eric is not having it. He's like, you're not in New York City anymore, which is funny because I would almost think that it would be the opposite, that like New York City would be much more cutthroat.
I totally agree. He says New York was a meritocracy of competency. We held each other accountable. We managed up with that. Basically being like, it's super normal in New York to trash your superior when they're not doing what you think you should. And he's putting all the blame on Eric's communication style with Harper for this deal falling apart. I'm sorry, but no, that's not why this deal is falling apart.
No. So Rishi then is also, Rishi's freaking out. He's just like, please tell me this book isn't falling apart. He's like, even someone as dodgy as me can't hide these losses. And so Eric then decides he's going to try to call Anna and says, watch me do your job. He calls her up and Anna is not taking any more calls. So now Harper basically comes over the hoot because now she's like, look, I got to figure out how to like save this thing. So now she's basically like, I'm going to try to go to Yaz. Yaz freaking hates her. They're in a fight. They haven't been talking.
Over the hoot. Hang on. That's fucking crazy. Yeah. Okay. You don't like shout across the trading floor, hey, fix this. Like, you know, like I need to talk to you about your client. That's insane. Especially with someone who you are like, whom you like hate. Yeah.
Yes, who hates you even more, even worse. So she goes to the hoot. She says, Yasmin, do you have this relationship with Anna Gearing? Yas picks up the phone. Harper tells her that the CPS desk desperately needs to get in touch with her and asks if she'll make the connection. And Yas is kind of just like toying with her. She knows she holds all the power and she knows like this is critical. So she's like, is there a patient on the table? Basically like, is it really life and death? And Harper then stands up and screams, what the fuck are you doing? And she walks over to Yaz and she says, whatever your issue was with me, it could cost the firm a fuck ton of dollars. And Yaz says, well, maybe you should think about that then. And Harper then walks away.
Like, that's a you problem, not a me problem. Yeah. Again, missed one 100%. Pure point. Yeah.
Which is like, exactly, which is why it was so funny. One pure point. And then it's like, that's a you problem. And so Harper walks away and under her breath, she says, unbelievable. And Hillary goes, what a little drama queen.
I know. I loved Hillary for saying that.
So now the next scene, this was interesting. So Eric walks into a conference room with DVD and he's carrying a tie that he had presumably cut.
Before we get to this scene, there was a line that
I'll
Eric
let you take that scene
to DVD in the conversation about the New York versus London struggle. He said, you cross the Rubicon with me. It's good night, Vienna, in no uncertain terms. He's basically laying down the gauntlet, again, with a lot of like ancient war quotes here, right? Crossing the Rubicon is when Caesar crossed the Rubicon in the Roman Empire, right? It's like a river, actually. Opening salvo of Caesar's civil war. And Goodnight Vienna, I had to look up, by the way. I have no fucking clue what that means. I think there's a 1932 operetta by the same name that was then later referenced in a Ringo Starr album. I don't know, listeners, if you know a better reference for Goodnight Vienna. But it basically just means we're done. So they are, like Eric has said, dude, I'm sorry. Like, no, you cannot manage up to me. I'm done with you. I run this place and you are subordinate to me. So then after that whole conversation, I didn't think they'd be talking. And I thought it was particularly strange that they were having this meeting in this office. And Eric comes in holding this tie from when he first cut DVD's tie when he did his first trade. He's playing the nostalgic mentor all of a sudden. So he's gone from you're dead to me to, hey, remember this? Like, remember back when you did your first trade? He also shares that it was an Hermes tie, by the way. It is absurd for someone who is doing their first trade, who is clearly only a few months into their first year analyst role, to be wearing an Hermes tie. Like, that's very expensive. And that's, you know, part of the whole story. And so DVD begins talking about how problematic the relationship between Eric and Harper evidently is, and expresses a legitimate concern that it's going to cost the desk money. Eric keeps using his seniority and the fact that he was DVD's mentor. He says, I knew you before your face was troubled by a razor, to try and dismiss it. It's like, you're a baby. You don't know what you're talking about, right? DVD says Adler, remember Adler is the big boss back in New York, would like to see some of that aggression channeled into driving business, AKA, as opposed to at each other. And DVD then says, you've had a couple of soft quarters. One gets a pass. Two could be terminal. And Harper jumps in and goes, well, Eric has or the desk has? Okay, where's the loyalty here, by the way, Miss Harper? Because what is it? Like, oh, if Eric had a couple bad quarters, like blow him off. You know what I'm saying? Or is it the desk? But I think she's also like, hang on, all of my sales credits are going to Eric. So like, who's the underperformer here? And DVD says, Phelan was central to the P&L. It's mission critical that you resecure him as anchor. Now, not just for the sake of P&L, but also for Eric's political position.
Well, he says, I know Phelan was critical for whatever halo Adler may have put on you. Best to keep him happy. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So, okay, now we know getting Phelan into this deal is not just about the dollars that it's making for the firm. It's about Eric's position. So they're setting up the stakes with this deal of, okay, is Rishi going to make or lose a ton of money for the firm? And is Eric going to win in this power struggle with DVD?
Yeah.
And so Eric says, in the spirit of pragmatism, Harper is a third-year analyst, and she knows enough to stay the fuck out of our way on stuff that carries high financial or reputational risk. Again, this was another area where we got her third-year analyst position clarified. But like, holy shit. And he says, she has zero value to a client without me. So he's basically just said, Harper means nothing to me. She's just another little tiny cog in the wheel in the machine that is my business. You can see the wheels turning in Harper's mind of like, okay, how do I prove my worth then? If what I've been doing this whole time hasn't been enough and I'm not going to get credit for it, I'm not going to get half the sales credits, I'm not going to get recognized as the person who's really driving this business, what can I do?
Yeah. And after Eric walks out, Harper says to DVD, I want you to know that Eric and I don't have the kind of relationship that people are saying we do. And DVD's like, well, why don't you focus on making sure that people realize you're here for your talent and not because your boss likes you, which is like, ooh.
And we get Jackie off camera as Eric exits the meeting going, I'm going to fucking cut you open and climb inside of you if you don't sort this out.
God, of course, Jackie. Oh
on the phone to a client. That was my favorite off-camera dialogue of the whole episode.
That is pretty good. But anyway, so next scene, now we're back with Robert. And so he's calling Nicole about the Rycam block, and he's like kind of nervous. And so she tells him, like, as he's asking if she's interested in this Rycam block, she's like, nah, not my sector when I dabble in equities. And so she asks if there's any FX plays off its back. So Robert tells her he'll get back to her. So she says, classic salesperson move to say that whenever you don't know. And he's again playing up this like, oh, I'm just a kid, to which she says it's presumptuous that he assumes that she will deal with him when they've never met. And so he says that he's going to book a dinner at her favorite place. So now we know that they're going to actually meet. I forgot that they hadn't met yet, but
banter is cute here, by the way. I'm like, oh, she's kind of egging him along. I was like, oh, wow. I don't care for Nicole after her previous incidents, but I was like, wow, maybe she's turned a corner and she's helping to mentor Robert up the sales curve. I was really hopeful at this point for Nicole's redemption story. Sorry. We'll get to it.
We'll get to it.
So after that, we do get a quick little scene with Harper and DVD chatting outside. They are 100% flirting now. There is no question about this. And DVD gets a line in about Eric, and he says, youth terrifies him unless he can control it. So that's something we've seen over the course of Eric's character arc so far, that's one potential read on his kind of biggest flaw, or one of his biggest flaws, I guess. So we're seeing how that's manifesting or not. He goes and straight up asks her out for drinks, and she says no, but you can tell she's kind of interested. So again, I haven't seen past this episode. I don't know where we're going with this. It's weird actually, because I see Harper as like such an asexual character in a lot of ways, but she has all these romantic entanglements. I don't know why. Whereas like Yasmin is so
just
like
the opposite.
Her whole thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so as we see in the next scene, Yasmin has been sleeping with Maxim and is getting dressed for her dinner with Celeste.
Yeah. So she's trying on these different outfits because she wants to look the right way. And she asks about PWM. She said, what's the line there? And so to which Maxim says, available for the right kind of person. And she's just like, oh God, I'm not sure how far I want to push that. And so as she walks outside, she's like leaving to leave for the dinner. Her dad is in her apartment and she's shocked that he's there. Like he seems like horrible, I don't want to say deadbeat dad. Like he's obviously incredibly wealthy, but doesn't seem like he gives a shit about
He's
his family,
exactly
really.
what I expected him to be, like this handsome, debonair, charismatic guy who is clearly a narcissist.
Oh, you could, 100%. And so Maxim then yells something very suggestive and walks out almost naked, like he's in his boxers. And Yaz's dad is just like, oh, I thought my father put you in charge of my money, not my daughter. And so joking,
but he's totally
he said,
unfazed. Like he's like,
totally
oh,
unfazed.
yes, like naked man here with my daughter, whatever. And he goes, I've had this priced into your relationship since you were 9 years old.
Right. And then, I mean, Maxim says, I think you're misremembering our youth. I'm 10 years older than her. So when she was 9, he was 19. And Yaz knows he's a creep. So she says, yeah, that's what it is. He's not misremembering any of it. So Yasmin says she has to go. Her dad asks to go to dinner. And she's just like, make sure he's gone when I'm back. So now next scene, now we're out to dinner with Robert and Nicole. And
I want to
she's
stop you right there because a two-person dinner between a salesperson and their client as a first point of introduction is very unusual, especially between a relatively junior salesperson and their client. The whole point of sales entertaining clients is not just so you can build that deeper personal interaction, but there has to kind of be a reason why you need to do it in person. Usually it's you bring a trader, you bring a research person, like we saw with that early dinner with Clement, Theo, Gus, Robert, and Usman, right? The whole point was like, let's get research here. Let's bring a trader. Let's do something. A one-on-one thing, especially between a male and female client, is just not as common. I did do one-on-one dinners with my clients, but it would typically not be the first dinner. And it would be after we'd built like a very deep personal relationship. It wouldn't be like the first intro dinner because it's just kind of a weird dynamic. This looks like a date. Yes, exactly. And you never want there to be any kind of suggestion that that's on the table. And so that's why this is such a standard practice of it's a big group thing. It's a dinner for 10. It's not a dinner for 2 as that first point of contact. And as the average point of contact, by the way.
Yeah. Well, but if you remember, I mean, first of all, her former coverage was Daria. Daria's gone. And then Harper, and obviously Harper wants nothing to do with her. And Robert's now trying to do this. And I mean, I do think there's a little bit where he's a little naive and he doesn't know like the
100%.
I wouldn't say protocol, but it's definitely something
he also
I
he saw Clement as his only mentor, right?
Yeah.
And Clement was only teaching him like the get clients drunk, take them out partying, do inappropriate things, like kind of thing. And Robert does seem like he's on a bit of an island. It doesn't seem like he's in deep with trading. It doesn't seem like he has like a broad base of support within the firm. Yeah, exactly. We're again, after how Daria treated him at the end of his like audition for his job at the end of season 1, I'm frankly still shocked that he's here, right? So like all of this perfectly tracks, but I'm just saying immediately red flags went up. And I have, of course, like huge red flags about Nicole, and they make it look as weird as possible. They're at this like romantic-y looking restaurant. You know what I'm saying? She's drinking red wine. It does look like an older woman on a date with a much younger man.
Yep. And so they're starting to bond over the fact that they're both from a lower class. So she talks about how they pigeonhole you because no one understands how someone like me made so much fucking money. And Robert says they make you noble. And by making you noble, they make you an anomaly. So you're not successful. You're a success story. And so they talk about how, it was. She says, and a success story just reinforces their rigidity of where you came from, your difference. The structure stays the same. They keep their power. And Robert then goes on.
I was like, holy shit. It was about throwaway lines during this dinner where like there's dropping some knowledge.
Yeah. And Robert says, my mom used to always say, if there's going to be an upper class in this country, then you're going to be a part of it. And I do want to actually just pause for 1 second because it is so interesting. We have talked in the past about this whole class dynamic. And it's something that in the US, like class is absolutely a thing, but it's not something that it's like you're born into a class and that's where you stay. If you become successful, like people just kind of don't give a shit. It's like, this is a successful person. This isn't a successful person. Like where you came from kind of doesn't matter. but it still seems like it's so ingrained. And this is what we've been getting feedback from, again, all of you guys, because again, our awesome UK listeners who literally will be like, yes, like the class thing is very real. And so it's a very interesting thing because again, when we were first seeing this, we're like, well, like what? And then everyone's like, no, but like it's a thing.
Yeah.
So,
whereas again, like shout out to America, man. Yesterday we had a call with someone who is worth hundreds of millions of dollars who was raised by a single mom working 2 jobs. Right?
Yep.
So,
yep.
I mean, it just goes to show you the American
Yep.
dream is real. Okay, but they eventually
yeah.
get to the Rycan deal, and I want to talk about this. So, Nicole had asked in that call that you mentioned if there was an FX play around the deal when they were on the phone. Robert said he didn't know. He did the right thing as a salesperson. Now he's got an answer. Good for him. Okay. He says short Norwegian krona is the play for the next 24 hours around the Rycan block. He says that there's Norwegian pension fund activity around the deal. So what they're saying here is that in order to purchase these US dollar denominated shares of equity, the big Norwegian pension funds are going to need to sell krona to buy dollars to spend on, again, those US dollar denominated assets. So what they're doing here is twofold. One, they're coming up with a nice little trade idea for him, which is great. But they're also keying you that any big FX trade that needs to be done around this deal is going to be a sign of someone who is potentially buying these shares. So just keep that little nugget in the back of your mind.
Yes. So Nicole then, she hears this and it does sound a little bit crazy. She's like, that's a very imaginative take on an equity story. I was expecting something a little bit more rote. It seems that she's intrigued.
That's praise for him, right? Like that's good.
Yeah.
Because she's like, hey,
100%.
like, I wasn't thinking of that. You did your homework. Like Robert's maybe not a terrible salesperson after all.
Yeah. And so then there's this little short nothing scene where Harper's at this party, like looking up that Pog Daddy thing, whatever.
She's at a bar looking up that person that she's been messaging on Instagram, and she starts making eyes at this random dude across the bar who catches her eye. And we all know that Harper has a very quick trigger on, oh, okay, like you seem fine for the night. So I think we read into this that Harper has picked up a dude that she's about to bring home.
100%. So now in the next scene, now we're out at dinner with Celeste.
3 dinners, Robert's dinner, Harper's dinner alone, and now Yasmin's private wealth dinner as our points of comparison for success or not success.
So they're speaking in Italian, and she sees Celeste touch the hand of the older man. Celeste then leaves, and Yaz, I don't know, like, it was really cringe. She then decides to touch this older man's hand too.
This was one of the most painful scenes I've ever had to watch.
Like, what the hell? So then he takes her hand off of his and says, you don't need to do that. And so when Celeste comes back, the older man says, I think Yasmin's a little confused how we do business. To which Celeste is like, well, she's very new, but she will be very good. Now, when they all then go to leave to say goodbye, Yaz apologizes to Celeste. She's like,
she looks like she's going to cry that whole rest of the dinner. Like she is mortified. She apologizes. I would too. Like this is, oh my God. Why?
But like, it was just so strange. Like what, like, and again, I think there's a little bit of that persona that Celeste uses that it's a little bit of a suggestive, like, are you a sex worker?
Correct.
No, but again, it's like and she thinks that this is like what she needs to be doing.
She thinks she needs to copy this intimate gesture. By the way, they might go back 50 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I have friends that I go back 20 years with that it might be appropriate for me to hold their hand during dinner about like when I'm saying something with passion. But if you're meeting them for the first time, you wouldn't be like, now let me hold your hand. Like,
no, you're like, get off of me, you creep.
Yes.
So Yas then apologizes to Celeste, who says, look, it's a confusing space when you're new. I spent my early 20s torturing myself. How could anyone ever take me seriously? I felt ostracized, then realized I was the club. I was the party. People are lucky to be in your company, not the other way around. I found the most personal of my professional relationships bear the most fruit. Celeste then takes off the shoes, the ones that presumably that Yaz had complimented her on in the very beginning. And as she's giving them to Yaz, she says, you don't have to like someone for them to be useful to you. And as she's doing this, I'm thinking in my head, she's taking this to mean that this is something with her dad. Like she might be able to like use her father. Like you don't have to like him, but he can still be useful to you. So
it's funny. I didn't immediately take it that Yaz had figured that out then.
Maybe not
later when she looks at the shoes and remembers that line, that's when she figures it out. But you might be 100% correct. But I mean, I was actually a little bit confused by this whole conversation because Celeste is giving her the advice, I think, of don't do what you see everybody else doing to fit in. Be your own club, be your own party, blah, 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 blah. But she also says, I found the most personal of my professional relationships bear the most fruit, right? So it's like, wait a minute, you're telling her, don't be like me. But also, here's what I did to be successful. Like, I thought this was a wonderful speech, but in the context of the touching the hand, I didn't quite understand it. I didn't understand exactly what Celeste is trying to teach her. The takeaway from this, you're 100% right, is what personal relationships in Yaz's own life can she now monetize, which is what everything has been leading towards with that interaction with her dad, with the interaction with Maxim, right? All these different things. But like in the context of what went terribly wrong at that dinner, I'm confused that this is the takeaway.
I agree.
That's what I didn't
100%.
get.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree with you. Anyway,
because
so
we
then she goes,
see Yasmin having sex with Maxim with the shoes on. Like, which is the meaning here?
Yeah. I don't know if maybe they were trying to connect that scene to like her having done this with Maxim, who she was friends with in the prior season, and then connected to, I don't know, but I'm with you. I was a little confused by that, but yeah.
Because I think what Celeste is saying at the end of the day is take what you want from people. Mm-hmm. It's get what you want out of these relationships that serves you. And that's what like these sparkly shoes, like Wicked just came out. So like all I can think of is like the red shoes that Dorothy has or whatever. But like take these sparkly shoes as the symbol of your newfound power to seize your personal relationships and monetize that. But again, in the context of that dinner, it just didn't quite land with me. It felt a little over my head. I don't know. Maybe I needed some more Shakespeare references.
No, I'm with you with that. It was a little confusing because kind of like, don't do this, but actually do. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm glad you took it the same way because I felt like an idiot watching it.
No, I did. Okay, so the next scene is awkward. So Nicole is super drunk, like always. By the way, actually, I should have mentioned at the dinner, she was drinking the whole bottle of wine herself. Robert is still sober, so like she was like, "Here, do you want some?" And he essentially was just like, "No." So he is sober. She is obviously very drunk, like she always tends to be. She seems like she gets drunk and she gets sloppy. So as they're driving home together in her car, right? She's got her driver. She says, "I'm old enough to be your mother, aren't I?"
They're drunk and they're bonding in the car. And one of them says, it's a shame that we're forced to make choices that dictate our whole life when we're too young to know that we're making them. And that's like, I mean, a whole episode in and of itself. We talk about this all the time, that you're forced to choose the paths of investment banking, private equity, et cetera, when you're a freshman and a sophomore in college in order to make sure you don't miss out. And then ultimately, we literally are talking about this on our Saturday episode. So many people wake up 40 and miserable because they've been on this like success track. So I was just like, okay, way to throw that line out there.
Yeah.
And then Nicole says to Robert, "I'm old enough to be your mom." And he makes this like stupid joke about mothers and sons.
The joke is a son says to her mom, "I need my personal space." And the mom says to the son, "You come out of my personal space." And then Nicole then puts her hand on Robert's leg and starts groping him, tells the driver to pull over.
Assaults him, but he goes along with it happily.
Yeah.
And then he calls her mommy afterwards, which is like not just beyond creepy, but also interesting because last week's episode was called Daddy. So let's keep that in mind too.
Yeah. So that was just super weird, super creepy, and WTF. So,
and all of my hopes for Nicole having made some kind of turnaround story, nope, she just loves hooking up with her salespeople and abusing her position of power with them. So cool. Yeah. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah. So next scene, Harper and Gus are both at home and they both have different guys with them. And basically both of them like tell them to leave because they both quote unquote got the ick. And so Harper tells Gus that she's distracted.
By the way,
Harper
this
says,
is Gus's first line of the whole season. We finally have
true.
Like,
he still has his blue hair. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got his blue hair. But I was like, oh, Gus is going to speak.
Yeah. We literally saw him just once in the very first scene of like the episode 1, and we just saw him. He didn't say anything. But Harper says, "I just feel like I'm getting in the way a lot." And Gus says, "You're the pain of everyone's existence." But he's joking. And so he then tries to give her a pep talk. And it's actually really cute that they're friends now. Because if you remember, Harper hated him in season 1. Like she thought he was stuck up and whatever. And now they're like
she
friends.
was like, Robert, why do you even like him? Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think this is important because in the pep talk, he says, "I'm going to give you what I got growing up a lot. You are good. You are worthy. Take what you deserve. Stop waiting for approval." And so when Harper wakes up in the middle of the night because her neighbors are fighting, she looks at her phone and DVD is texting her that he can't sleep because he's anxious about the deal. Okay, they get on the phone and she basically lets him know. And I think it's thanks to, in part, that little push from Gus she's got a plan exactly to save the deal. We don't know how much she reads him in on that plan, but we know now that Harper is going to take action because I think of that extra push that she got from Gus of stop waiting for approval, take what you deserve.
So they are basically trying to come up with a plan B because they say Eric is a plan A type of guy. There is no plan B. It's Phelim or bust. So they're now trying to come up with some kind of plan B. So next scene, Harper decides to go to the tennis match that she knew that Bloom had between him and his son. And so as she's showing up, I mean, you can tell Bloom is pissed. He's like, this can't be happening. And so Harper then asks if the person he's playing with is his son, because it's like kind of older guy. And Bloom is just like, no, my son stood me up. But Bloom is pissed that she's there. And so she's like, but you told me where you'd be. And he's like, that's borderline material, which is, again, not untrue. And so she says that he wanted something material. So she's bringing him something material. And exactly what you like. She says, a post-pandemic play, Edge. He talks about the gold rush and he talks about gold miners because when she says post-pandemic play, he's worried she's going to be bringing him some type of like vaccine, some type of almost like where people were buying into like Moderna, but it's like, dude, that play's done.
That play's done.
And so he's talking about the gold rush and he says gold miners went bust. He's drawing the analogy between people, again, who are bringing him these like worthless ideas and that. And so he says, I'm looking for the picks and shovels.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So he then says he's looking for the picks and shovels. And she says, this is a pick and shovel play. Rycan Healthcare. Huge block, discounted price. We no longer have an anchor. Let's make that you. And he asks if there's the special interest. So that's that Anna from Future Dawn. And Harper admits that no, she's not confirmed, but it looks likely. And Bloom says no one's participating without a special interest. What does your boss say? And again, Harper doesn't answer quick enough. Like she keeps choking, but Bloom then says, do you have an ice scraper for my windshield you want to sell me? So he is not interested, it seems, or at least not right this second.
She doesn't really have anything to say. If she like could truly formulate a pitch here, then maybe he would be in. But I actually think it's really interesting with this pick and shovel line because that's exactly what we're seeing in the AI space, right? Everybody's trying to pick like, oh, which AI company is going to be the one that's going to make like the new super intelligence and blah, 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 blah. But investors have broadened out from trying to pick those winners and saying, okay, well, someone's going to win. So let's just go outside of that and think about the energy and the infrastructure that's going to be needed to support these huge tech build outs. And so that's what we've seen in the markets here in the US over the past couple of months has been that explosion in those spaces that it's like, again, we're going to need to power.
You see that with NVIDIA. I mean, NVIDIA, I mean, and obviously, but like they're the chip maker, right? They're the picks and shovels. Like that's the main one. But then to your point, people are trying to now broaden out to be like, okay, it takes a shit ton of energy to power these models. And so now we need to actually look, see, that's exactly right. 100%. Because it's the type of thing where to bet on who is going to be the winner, like that's not as easy as people might think. And you go back and you look at the corollaries between what happened with like the .com. And so you're exactly right. Anyway, I love that point. So so now next scene, we're at the dinner with Yaz and her dad. And so they talk and you can tell that it seems like now Yaz is, initially it seems like she's just trying to like establish a relationship with her dad.
She tells this story of how when she was a child, they were vacationing in the Amalfi Coast. He bought her a little duck toy, and when she threw it overboard in some little childish tantrum, he sailed around and bought her another one. His memories, when he's hearing the story and being like, oh yeah, this happened, it's all the other stuff. I was catastrophically hungover. We were at the ER because of your German nanny who hit her head swimming at midnight. Like, were you having an affair with the German nanny? Like, basically, all the adults had this drama going on. And oh yeah, I do remember that you, my child, were there, right?
Yeah.
And she leans forward and says, I think that's when I felt closest to you. And you see the look on his face, suddenly maybe realizing that he isn't the wonderful dad that he clearly thinks he is in his own mind. And she leans in and puts her hand on his, just the same way Celeste did with the client, and says, have you ever thought about managing the family's money through Peerpoint? So now we know that Yasmin's arc in this episode is complete, right? Because she has figured out, okay, I just need to get whatever I can out of these relationships that serves me. That is a fucking cold line. And this like sweeping orchestral music comes in. So we see Yasmin now prancing into the office.
She comes marching off the desk. She runs into Kenny and she first says, good to have you back, but behave yourself now, right? So she's like holding no bars. And then she marches up to Hillary and she says, look, I'm going to be splitting time between this and wealth management. By the way, like that is not normal. Like, no, you don't typically like work in two different things unless you are in, call it like the associate pool, and your job is to be staffed on different desks to see what you like. You don't just decide, hey, I'm an analyst on FX. I want to now go freaking like split my time somewhere else. That doesn't work that way. But to your point, I love the interaction where Hillary says, do you really want that? They all seem so superficial up there. And Yaz says, well, we're just moving our money around. To which he replies, no. What I do is far more important than that, which is like exactly the mindset of what they're doing is superficial, but I'm doing the important work.
Yeah, we're moving hedge funds money around, not wealthy people.
Yeah. So I loved that whole thing. And where is it with the stupid bust?
Point. Yeah.
So he
gets a package delivered to the desk and picks up a bust his wife has had made of him wearing the mask that has become a fixture around his face because he is the post-COVID person who is super paranoid about getting sick.
And again, I assume that was a message from his wife. Like, you're a freaking psychopath.
Like, we've moved on.
Chill.
Like, take the mask off. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And at that point, Yasmin looks at him as he's staring at this bust of himself. And she says, let's level with each other. We're all cunts, aren't we? Let's just lean into it. So basically, Yasmin is at the point. She is, for me, this is like emotional rock bottom for Yasmin. There are no sacred cows left in her life. She doesn't give a shit about Kenny. She's just told him off effectively. She's just told Hillary off. She's told her dad off. And again, I think by having sex with Maxim with the shoes on, I think that kind of represented, I'm just using you too.
Yep. Oh, that's such a good point. I didn't think of that, but that's a really good point. So then now in the next scene, Robert is trying to get the courage to now call Nicole at Mellon Mercer. And Harper asks how it went. When he replies, she says, well, she's a character. And obviously she hasn't said anything about what happened or their history, but that's obviously something that like she knows and is obviously coloring her view of this relationship that they have. And so he finally
she doesn't know that Nicole molested Robert. And by the way, remember, Harper and Robert have been sleeping together. So like this is all such a fucked up interaction.
Yes. So he then calls her and says, buy the dollar Noki through me pre the expected deal announcement. She tells him to go for it. And he is so happy because this is his first trade that he's booking in his name, which is also like, is that normal, Jen, to be a third-year analyst before you book your own trade?
No. Remember, we had DVD doing his first trade as a first-year analyst who hasn't even shaved yet and getting his tie cut. Yeah. And just for those of you who aren't familiar with the slang, because he says buy dollar Noki through me in the lead up to the announcement. Again, NOK is the short code for Norwegian krona. So buy dollars, sell Norwegian krona. So that's that trade that he basically recommended.
Got it. And she says, what kind of person would I be if I didn't drop the ladder behind me?
After molesting him, by the way, like we're supposed to respect this woman. And she like makes him say please first too in this like dominatrix way. And Venetia drops off a coffee for Robert during that scene, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think she has a little crush on him. But so next scene, they're in the meeting and DVD asks if Eric has firmed Phelim up. And he says he's still working on it and is unresponsive. She's a brick wall. But Eric is like, look, I'm sure that Phelim's just waiting for her to be firmed up. DVD says angrily, we negotiated this 3.5-yard trade, which for those of you guys who don't speak like yards and sticks, a yard is $1 billion. So this is a $3.5 billion trade at a ridiculously low 3.5% discount. I want to put a pin in this just for a second because you assured us that you had a corporate home for the paper. Eric says, trust me, he'll call. DVD is obviously not buying it. Okay, I wanted to put a pin in that 3.5% discount because this is, I think, really cool. So I want to do just a quick detour. They're literally, so we're recording, what's today? It is December 6th, 2024. Well, Friday, yes.
Oh, like Friday.
But the point is that there was an article that we talked about on the Skinny On episode yesterday about a block trade. And so, Jen, can you give a few of the details? Because the discount that they did was even lower than 3.5%.
Correct. So there's
can you talk
a $2.2 billion block trade for a real estate development stock where CIC wanted to liquidate their holdings. And so Citigroup took down the deal and they took it down at a 1.5% discount, I think. And so 3.5 certainly sounds great relative to like 1.5%, but it ended up being a bust because Citi underwrote the deal. They basically put something like $1.9 billion of their own capital down to take down this stock at this 1.5% discount. grossly miscalculated the investor demand and ended up having to sell out of that paper at something like a 3 or a 4.5% discount because it started trading down in the markets. And all of these investors who were supposed to take the paper off their hands backed away. So I think they locked in a loss of something like $27 million day one and were working their way out of the rest. So the article that I read was estimating that they were going to lose something like $50 million on this trade. So you can see how badly wrong these trades can go. It's exactly what happens here, like exactly what they're talking about. Rishi's fear here just happened to Citi 3 days ago. Now,
yes,
I will say this. I don't know in the broader context, that's what I was kind of asking before, if 3.5% is exceptionally low, if 1.5% is more the norm. But again, given how terribly that deal went, clearly not. Clearly 1.5 is way too tight a discount.
Yes. So anyway, I thought that was funny when they were like a ridiculously low 3.5% discount. And then after seeing that other one, I was like, well,
that might be what you need. I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, so Rishi is pissed and he says, we opened 5 minutes. My budget on this book is 100 million, 100 bars. I'm not losing 50 bars because you can't do the primary school work of placing stock. By the way,
the
this
exact amount that Citi's losing, $50 million is what he thinks he's going to lose.
Yes. So DVD pipes in and says that Harper's working on a backup plan. And Eric is like, well, what is it? So she explains that she met with Jesse Bloom because he wants more exposure to the healthcare space. And Rishi gets up angrily and says, if this costs me my compensation or pushes me out the door, I'm dragging all of you down with me. And Eric says sarcastically to Harper, maybe after you've gotten through to Bloom, you can try Bill Ackman next, or maybe one of the Gettys. So he's like, this is a pie in the sky, like this is not going to go anywhere.
And even DVD says like, let's not try to waste time. If I'd known last night we were talking that was your big plan B, I would have talked you down off that ledge. Like, this is fucking dumb.
Yeah. So on the trading floor, Rishi's screaming, we're collapsing into pre-market. I don't have the lines to hold this much size. The bell rings in 5 minutes. Give me a home.
By the way, when he says I don't have the lines, I just want to make this point.
Yeah.
It's not like he just had $3.5 billion lying around and bought all these equities. This is so he has risk limits. So he's super levered up. He is borrowing money to hold these shares temporarily until he can get them out. He can't keep these on his books indefinitely. And just like we talk about the time frame horizon of like a Warren Buffett investment where it's like, oh, I'll buy this stock and check back in 30 years. It's like check back in 30 fucking minutes because that's how long he can hold this risk for. He has got to get this risk off his books urgently.
Yep. So Eric keeps trying to call Phelim and DVD is just like, I didn't know this desperate on blind faith. And Eric says it doesn't. Rishi again yells. And so for 4 minutes now, so 5 minutes now, 4 minutes, I puke this paper into the market, eat the loss, and never forgive any of you. The phone then rings. It's an unknown number. Eric answers saying Phelim, but it's not Phelim. And Eric then turns to Harper and says, it's for you. So Harper picks up and shocker, Jesse Bloom is on the line. And he says, I'm sick of commenting on the direction of the wind. Shall we make it blow? Back to the very beginning of the episode. So he says, let's find out how essential we are. He asks what's going on with Anna, and Harper says she'll find out. So she gets on over the hoot, and she says she's like, I'm sorry I'm in such a rush with you, but I need your help. I need access to Anna now. So Yaz is finally like, okay, like this seems serious. So she decides to call Anna and she
By the way, Hillary off camera at this point goes, it's just a tickle. I'm 99% sure it's not COVID.
So I didn't even notice
about that off camera. Yeah, there's a little like,
oh God, COVID drama. Yeah. So Yasmin decides to call Anna and she says she has Harper on the line and can vouch for her. So Anna picks up and says she won't discuss imminent business, but she can feel the question. So Harper now is like, okay, I need to think on my feet. I can't ask her about this block trade. So she instead says that they have a misbooked FX trade. Her back office is having a hard time getting in touch with them to confirm. So she says that they have Peerpoint buying 250 million quid at 136 spot 62. Anna says the spot is right. The notional is wrong. She bought $250 million, which she intends to put to work. Harper's like, I'm so sorry, because again, she's now just fishing for information, but she just says, oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. And so Harper then hangs up. She goes back to Jesse and she says, Anna isn't in the book, but she's buying at the open. Jesse asks how she can be so sure. And she explains her flagship fund is sterling denominated. And so when she needs to buy a US asset like Right Hand Healthcare, again, a US company, she needs to raise dollars. So she's going to use it to buy the asset. Bloom asks how much stock their trader has and what the offer price is. And Rishi says he has 50 million shares at $45. So
yeah, that was the last trade price.
Yes. So he then says he can sell the 50 million at that. And Bloom knows that Rishi's order book is fucked. Like, he knows that the market opens in 30 seconds. And he says, we'll do 50 at 44, not 45. So he's trying to negotiate. And Rishi is like, absolutely not. So Jesse then says, fine, he'll buy 75 million shares at $44.50. And Rishi's getting annoyed because he has 50 million shares. He doesn't have 75 million shares. And so if he were to sell 75 million to Jesse, he's now selling what he has, but he is now short 25 million, which is also not something, like, he doesn't want that risk either.
Well,
so,
I would actually,
or maybe
this
he
is the
does.
point where I was like, be a better fucking trader, Rishi. Do a trade and take some risk. I mean, work that. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I don't want to be short. Okay, you don't want to be short. If actually we do truly believe in this deal, you actually think it is going to trade up so massively on the follow and stuff like that, but you just adjust the price. Again, there's a price for everything. So he was like, oh, I can't get short. It's like, yes, you can.
Well, yeah. So then Harper finally says, we'll fill 50 now and we'll do a working order for the 25 at the open. And Jesse agrees. And for whatever reason, he then says limit order at 44.75. So because before he was at 44.50,
well,
now he's paying more.
Yeah. So Harper's like, listen, we'll get you all filled. We'll do the full 75 million, working that $25 million balance, but you got to pay us more for it. Right.
Got it. Because so the 50 million, they say 20% of the ADTV, which is average daily trading volume, and 25 million working order at the open. So then he yells to his other trader that he wants basically that other trader managing the 25 million that they now need to find once the market opens. But at the end, obviously, people are freaking thrilled. Rishi says really good shit. And she looks actually like she's getting like emotional and walks off the desk. I feel like it's like all flooding to her. That she actually did a great job. But
well, there's this moment where Rishi says yours and Jesse says mine. And it's the first time we've like seen a trade that's like done properly with like good execution and everything. And like watching this scene, if you can't understand what I loved about my job, I'm so sorry for you. Like the feeling that Harper must be feeling amazing, the reason that tears were coming to her eyes, like I was getting emotional watching this because it was like, yes, she has finally done her job fucking properly, right? True, she used a really backhanded, inappropriate way to suss out what another client was doing and weaponize that information on behalf of her client. But like, that's Harper's way. And I'm almost not mad about that because she got shit done. And
I feel like it was a very smart way to do it too. I mean, she also could have called her back office because their back office probably would have known what was going on too. But I don't know if they can tell her that.
And also she weaponized the exact mistake that she made in the FX trade in season 1, episode 3 or 4 with the mismatched notional. The size was based on that price on the trade. It would have been 183 million sterling to buy dollars instead of 250 million. So it was literally the exact same error. I don't think that was a coincidence. And I mean, Jesse says to her, who taught you to fish? Meaning back to our title, Giant Squid. She has caught him because she did her job properly. So people ask what salespeople do all day. This is it. This is how you add value as a salesperson. She brought value to the trader. She brought value to her client. I was just like, oh, yes.
And then the best part, the cherry on the top of the cake, is then Phelim calls. And they're like, you're going to have to get in line. So
yeah, Rishi's like, tell him he's in a queue now and he'll have to wait, right? And like you can see Eric sucking it up to deal with this, but you can tell he's not mad. He's proud. You can tell, I think.
And then literally the show closes out. I don't really give a shit. She goes to the bathroom, whatever. She like takes her phone, looks up some stupid person on Instagram.
She still keeps looking up that Pog Daddy 911 on her Instagram. So like she just had her moment of triumph and she's still looking up this person who has responded to all of her like, you're a fucking coward messages and says, I'm not who you're looking for. And so that mystery continues, but like she walks back onto the trading floor and she gets a slow clap, for fuck's sake. Like I haven't seen a slow clap on a trading floor. Like this is like the end of a 90s teen movie when you made the girl with paint on her overalls and glasses, the prom queen. Like we're getting a slow clap.
She saw that? Yeah. So this episode I actually really liked because it was so trading finance execution forward. I mean, it tied back to a literal live deal that actually happened a few days ago.
Happened this week, so 100%. Like, what are the odds?
I love this episode. And but so who are we bullish on? I mean, like, come on, Harper.
I'm bullish on Jesse Bloom. I like him as a character.
Yeah. And then who are we bearish on?
Fucking Nicole from Alan Mercer. Nicole, I thought you were going to have a redemption arc. Nicole is just, ugh.
And probably Eric. I mean, I do think had the whole situation with Harper not happened, they wouldn't have been in this whole pickle to begin with. Had she gone to the meeting, that
had she
meeting,
sent him a note, I can't make it to the meeting.
Him a note,
Jesus, we said this in the last thing. It's insane.
So
Harper doesn't have to be so bad about so many things and then have to pull a rabbit out of the hat at the last second.
I mean, she's good at her job. She's smart. Again, the quick on her feet idea to like do the FX thing to figure out if she was in the book was genius. Yes. But she is brilliant, but she just makes bad decisions. But I still like her. I still want her to win. I like Harper. That's not true. It's a love-hate. Sometimes I like her, and then sometimes I'm like, I want to strangle you through the phone.
I spend 99% of every episode wanting to strangle Harper. I really do. I don't care for her. I actually like Yasmin. I like this. I like doesn't DGAF Yasmin, who's like, you all work for me now. I don't care about any of you. I give up. I like that. I loved her swagger back onto the trading floor of like, I'm going to do what I want.
I agree with that. But Jen, we somehow were able to finish this in under 2 hours, which might be a record because, by the way, for whatever reason, the first season was all like 45 minutes. These episodes now are an hour. And again, I love watching the show, but like for us to go through, I mean, we're taking 10 plus pages of notes every time, and to take the like level of notes on every single second of every single episode when it's an hour just is a lot more work than when it was 45 minutes. So hopefully this will be a relatively quick industry episode for you guys. Thank you so much for being here. And any final words, Jen, before we hop off?
No, we love you guys. Please share the show with a friend, and I hope you're having fun with us.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys. Bye.
Bye.